In this video, I want to go over chapter 1 of Jennifer Saul's Lying, Misleading, and What is Said. So in this book, Saul is concerned with the concept of lying as it pertains or relates to the concept of misleading. And this is done for the purposes of trying to determine which is morally worse. Is lying worse or is misleading worse? So for instance, here, take the following example, right? I'm assuming people have background knowledge on the Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky case, right? Where Bill Clinton had an extramarital affair with his then intern, Monica Lewinsky, right? So after the matter, when people were interrogating Bill Clinton, at some point they asked, did you have inappropriate relationship with Monica Lewinsky? And Bill Clinton responds by saying, there is no improper relationship. Well, presumably when Bill Clinton asserts this, that there is no improper relationship, by that point, the relationship between him and Monica Lewinsky had ended. So it appears that what he is saying is true, right? He's not saying something that's false. He's not denying that there is an improper relationship. But it is the present tense use of is that is being used to mislead the person who is interrogating him, right? Because maybe somebody will take this to mean, oh, okay, there is this denial, and assuming that quote unquote Bill Clinton is or was at the time this trustworthy individual, maybe people would be convinced by that, right? So Bill Clinton isn't clearly lying, but he is misleading by using the present term, present tense is in this case, right? So is it worse that he misleads, or would it have been just as bad or worse if he actually would have lied and said there was never an improper relationship? And this is what Saul wants to explore in this book. Now, from the outset, Saul provides us with the definition of lying that she takes to be the most appropriate in order to make a distinction with misleading, and then go about analyzing or determining which is worse, right? So the definition that Saul provides us is the following. So if a speaker is not the victim of linguistic error, right, they know what they're talking about, is not using metaphors or hyperbole or irony or any of that sort of thing, then said individual is lying if they say that P, the proposition in question, whatever the lie is, right, they believe that P is actually false, and then they take themselves to be in a quote-unquote warranting context. So we'll talk about what a warranting context is later on. So now, the way she goes about defending this definition of lying is by going over other definitions of lying and showing how those other definitions of lying fail in various different ways, and then slowly building her case for this particular definition of lying, right? So essentially what she does is, look, take these 5 or whatever definitions of lying. Well, 1 fails because of this, right? 2 fails because of this, 3 fails because of this, so on and so forth. And then she says, and then my definition of lying accounts for all of those failures. So that's what demonstrates that my definition of lying is the correct one. So in order to see this, then let's jump into some of these definitions of lying. So consider this first definition. Let's call it line 1. Line 1 says, a person lies just in case they say something false with the intent to deceive their audience. So suppose there's a politician named Tony who wants to convince his constituents or Congress that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction in order to justify an invasion of Iraq, right? And so he does this by saying the following. Saddam Hussein is a dangerous man. Now, Tony believes that it is true that Saddam Hussein is a dangerous man. But nevertheless, he's trying to convince or manipulate people into believing that given this, the truth of this, which Tony assumes is true, that this would be enough to insinuate that there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Now, let's suppose that unbeknownst to Tony, Saddam Hussein suffered a stroke that has made him a kindly soul, no longer dangerous. So as a matter of fact, Saddam Hussein is no longer dangerous, a dangerous individual. Well, according to line 1, it would appear that Tony would be lying because what Tony is in fact saying is actually false. And Tony is saying this with the intent of deceiving his audience. But again, Tony thought that what he was saying was true. It just so happened that, as a matter of fact, what he was saying turned out to be false. So Tony meets the conditions for line 1 in that what Tony is saying is false, and he's trying to deceive his audience. But this seems wrong given that Tony, at least it didn't appear that Tony was trying to lie, right? Tony was saying something that he took to be true. That Saddam Hussein is a dangerous man. Now, obviously, he was doing it with the intentions of deceiving individuals into coming to believe that this entails that there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, but he wasn't attempting to lie about the fact that Saddam Hussein is a dangerous man. Tony actually believed this. He believed it to be true. Now, it just so happened to have been false because Saddam Hussein had this stroke. Thus, according to the definition, it seems that he's lying. So again, while intuitively we should take Tony not to be lying, and Tony didn't take himself to be lying, according to number 1, Tony would be lying. So it seems that the definition line 1 should be incorrect because of cases like this. So now let's look at definition 2. Line 2 says, a person lies if and only if they say something that is false, which they believe to be false, so they actually believe what they're saying is false, with the intention to deceive their audience. So now let's suppose that Tony wants people to believe that there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, but Tony doesn't have any evidence for this claim. He nevertheless wants his constituents and Congress to believe that there are in order to justify an invasion. So he says, there are weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, right? Now, let's just imagine that in this counterfactual situation that, in fact, there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. So what Tony is saying is true, but obviously Tony doesn't know that what he is saying is true because, again, he is just merely asserting that there are weapons of mass destruction for the purposes of convincing his constituents. So he's saying something that is in fact true. He's not saying something that's false. So according to line 2, definition line 2, he wouldn't be lying because he's not saying something that is false. He's saying something that is true. But clearly it seems that he's trying to lie. Right? He's trying to lie about the fact that there are weapons of mass destruction because he doesn't know that there are. He just, for all intents and purposes, he maybe assumes that there aren't any weapons of mass destruction. He nevertheless wants his audience to believe that there are weapons of mass destruction. So it does seem to be the case that he is attempting to lie, even though what he's saying is true. Must there be an intention to deceive? Well, we saw this with the Sorensen article, Bald-Faced Lies, that there are cases in which one need not try to deceive in order to lie. And Saul, agrees with Sorensen in those cases, but she provides a different case, a case in which there's a man who witnessed a murder, and this man is put on trial as a witness, and everybody knows that this man actually saw the murder occur. There's even video footage of the individual witnessing the murder, right? They just want him to be on the record during the trial. So they ask the individual, did you see the murder occur, blah, 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 right? And then the witness in question responds with, I did not see the murder, right? And everybody knows that what this individual is saying is false, right? The man knows that is false. The judge, the lawyers, everybody in the courtroom, the witnesses, everybody knows that what he's saying is false. So this is a case of a bald-faced lie. He's not trying to deceive anybody, but nevertheless, it appears that what he's doing is lying. So again, if we recall from the Sorensen article, what cases of bald-faced lying appear to demonstrate is that the intent to deceive is not necessary in order for an act to be considered a lie. So far we have our traditional definitions where lying seems to require the speaker to say something that is false with the intent to deceive. It requires them to believe that what they say is false with the intent to deceive, and it appears that there needs to be attempt to deceive. But Saul provides examples or counterexamples to all these definitions, demonstrating that these conditions can fail, and nevertheless, the cases in question can be cases of lying, or that the consequence or entailment of the definition doesn't actually follow for various different reasons, right? So what we are left with then is the following, right? Well, Saul wants to say, well, there still seems to be a sense in which the notion of deception is necessary, at least in most standard cases of lying. Put aside bald-faced lying, right? In most standard cases of lying, deception still seems to be important. So what gives? Well, deception in lying, at least in most cases, seems to apply in what she calls a warranting case, right? So, a warranting case or a warranting context is a context in which one assumes or one is suggesting, let's say, that what one is saying is in fact true, whether they are saying it explicitly or implicitly, right? It's the context, again, is suggestive of the assertion being made to be true. So consider joking, for example, or storytelling. If I'm telling a story or if I'm joking, most of what I'm saying is going to turn out to be false, right? I mean, that's kind of the nature of storytelling or joking, that what I'm saying are actually falsehoods. But we all know that those are falsehoods, right? Nobody takes what I am saying to be affirmative of the truth, nor am I suggesting that what I am saying is true, right? That is not a case of a warranting context, right? Warranting contexts are most normal cases when you have just regular conversations with individuals, or say when you're in a work context or a school context and you're asking, say, your professor questions or students questions, and they give you what seems to be genuine answers. Those are warranting contexts because you are taking what they are saying just implicitly within the context to be affirming the truth, right? So Saul argues that barring, like, joking cases, storytelling cases, metaphor cases, bald-faced lies cases, in most standard contexts, these are warranting contexts. So again, and then this is where deception is going to play a role in the lying. Right? So this takes us back to Saul's definition of lying, where she takes an individual to be lying when they say that P, whatever the proposition is, they believe P to be false, and they also take themselves to be in a warranting context, a context in which the audience in question is assuming that what the speaker in question is saying is affirmative of the truth, right? They are affirming what they're saying is true, whether explicitly or implicitly, right? Explicitly would be in a case in which, say, you're taking an oath to tell the truth. Like, I promise I'm going to tell the truth, and there's no reason for you to lie, so people are going to assume that that's the case. Or implicitly, just like in everyday regular context, right? If you email me, for example, and ask me a question about, like, you know, uh, something about school or your grade, like, you're going to be assuming that what I am telling you is true, and I'm not trying to deceive you because that's a warranting context. I'm not trying to tell you a story or a joke. So again, it's going to be important to keep in mind when reading Saul's book that Saul doesn't take this definition of lying to be, say, the correct definition of lying, right? I mean, obviously there are going to be issues with this if we kind of dig deep enough. But she thinks that this is the best definition of lying to make the case that there's a difference between lying and deceiving, right? So if you're really trying to contrast lying from it's not deceiving, sorry, misleading. If you're really trying to contrast lying from misleading, she takes this particular definition to be the best definition. And this is going to be her working definition for the remainder of the book and what she's trying to accomplish, right? Which is to try to assess cases of lying and cases of misleading and determine, like, which is worse. Is it the case that lying is always worse because there is this act of deception that goes into the act of lying, or is misleading sometimes worse or always worse, right? And this is what we're going to be exploring in Saul's book. So this concludes this video.